Hi everybody, I hope that you're all doing really well. So today I am back to talk book versus musical again with Les Mis. Last time we focused on the differences between the book and the musical for part 1 Fantine. This time we are looking at part 2 Cosette and part 3 Marius. Now you might be wondering, Charlotte, why are we doing 2 parts this time? And that's because in adapting the book of Les Mis into a stage musical, it doesn't really seem like they kept a whole lot. In fact, it would probably be easier for me to say what they did keep rather than what they didn't keep. It's kind of like they took a pair of scissors to part 2 and part 3 and just went. So let's get into these book to musical changes. First off, part 2 Cosette is actually quite an infamous section of Les Mis because it starts off with a massive 50-page recount of the Battle of Waterloo. It's one that I've mentioned on my reread of Les Mis, and it's one that a lot of people on the Discord server were kind of struggling through. And if you too were somebody who struggled with this section, you'll be quite pleased to know therefore that Waterloo does not happen in the musical. I'm actually struggling to think how they would have done Waterloo as part of the musical, to be honest. But there you go, that's how they were able to get the musical to be so short, because 50 pages just gone. Another book to musical change is that in the musical, Valjean is not recaptured before he's able to go to the Thénardiers to collect Cosette. In the book, after the confrontation scene between Javert and Valjean, Valjean escapes momentarily but then is very quickly recaptured, and he spends another 6 months in jail, but then makes a rather impressive escape by pretending to have drowned. And this is completely cut out of the musical. After the song confrontation, Valjean is able to very quickly evade Javert, which leads us very quickly on to Castle on a Cloud and being able to meet Cosette for the first time. Now a bit of a character personality change between the book and the musical. In the musical, Monsieur Thénardier is played as much more of a comical figure than he is in the book. In fact, the Thénardiers in the musical are fan favourites because they are the only source of comic relief. Whereas in the book, I wouldn't call Thénardier a particularly comical man. He's much more bitter, much more vengeful. He is definitely a dangerous man who you do not want to cross. But he's quite hapless, he doesn't have a lot of focus. He isn't somebody who is willing to buckle down and actually do work for what he wants. Something that is also changed for the musical is that Monsieur and Madame Thénardier have much more of an equal partnership, whereas in the book, even though Madame and Monsieur do conspire together, we see through the book that she is very much at his mercy, that he is definitely the dominant of the two. If she were ever in disagreement over any detail with Monsieur Thénardier, an unthinkable eventuality in any case, never would she have contradicted her husband in public about anything. Later on he says, "There was something of the unknown about Thénardier, hence the absolute domination of that woman by that man. At certain times she saw him as a beacon of light, at others she felt his menace." And that is certainly not the characterization that you see in the show. If anything, there are times where Madame Thénardier is kind of egging him on and telling him off for things that he's done. Another little minor change between the book and the musical is that in the book, Valjean stays overnight at the Thénardiers' inn, kind of to get a sense of their treatment of Cosette before he makes his big announcement that he's going to take Cosette away. I think obviously for time reasons, when they made the musical, they decided not to have that overnight stay and to just have him quickly take Cosette. And then pretty much everything that happens in the book of part 2 Cosette after Valjean goes to the Thénardiers and then takes Cosette away, pretty much everything in the book after that point is scrapped from the musical. So we have no scenes of Cosette and Valjean at the Gorbeau tenement. We do not see them escape from the Gorbeau tenement and take refuge at the convent, though that section is kept in the movie. And looking at the book right now, that section of the Gorbeau tenement and the convent takes up more than 100 pages of the book, and it's completely scrapped from the musical. Once again, for time, I completely understand why they did cut it out. There's only so much that you can do in a 2.5-hour show, and the main takeaway from that section is Cosette and Valjean are safe. Valjean is going to be keeping his promise and he's going to raise Cosette. Let's just quickly fast forward 8 years. So now getting into part 3 Marius. And once again, there is not much that is kept between the book and the musical. First off, a little minor thing to note. The beginning of part 3 Marius in the book starts off with us following the character of the gamine, the little street boys and girls who wander around Paris, which is eventually introducing us to our main gamine, Gavroche. A little minor change from the book to the musical is that we learn in the book that Gavroche and Eponine Thénardier are actually brother and sister, Gavroche being the unwanted son of the Thénardiers. However, in the musical, this is never made explicitly clear. We're just kind of following Gavroche and being like, oh, there's a plucky young lad, but we don't know why he's significant, really. We know that he has a connection to the Friends of the ABC, but we don't know much more about him than that. A major change from the book to the musical is that Marius Pontmercy's backstory with his grandfather is not in the musical. In the book, we learn more about Marius Pontmercy, the fact that he is raised by his grandfather because his grandfather disapproved of Marius's father and his Bonapartist tendencies. Marius grows up thinking that his father didn't care about him, and when he finds out that that was very much not the case and he learns more about his father's good deeds and his politics, he ends up having an argument with his grandfather and his grandfather kicks him out. At which point Marius stumbles across the Friends of the ABC. And here is where another massive change happens, because in the book, Marius is kind of skeptical about the Friends of the ABC and their planned rebellion, whereas in the the musical, we are shown that Marius is very much committed to the cause of the rebellion. He just gets a little bit distracted when he meets Cosette. Whereas Marius in the book has really no intentions of fighting. He's not as politically dedicated as his friends. Another change from the book to the musical is that in the book, Marius comes across Cosette and her father much earlier than he does in the musical. In the musical, it's basically like the Disney love at first sight scenario. They don't even exchange words, they just look at each other one time and then they decide that they are in love. Marius commissions Eponine to go find her, and then he stumbles into Cosette and Valjean's garden, professes his love, Cosette reciprocates, and it's like, oh. Whereas for better or for worse, Marius spends a lot longer with his fascination with Cosette. Though still, he doesn't exchange an actual conversation with her before he confesses his love. Marius originally sees Cosette when she's around 13, 14 years old, and he doesn't think much of her. He actually thinks that she's quite ugly. However, when Cosette turns 15, magically she blossoms and Marius thinks that she's the most beautiful woman he's ever seen. And then he starts stalking her. Yeah, maybe the love at first sight in the musical is better. He basically starts camping out at the Luxembourg Gardens at the precise time that he thinks that Cosette and Valjean are going to be making their way through the gardens. And every time he doesn't see her, he's really disappointed. He starts wearing fancier clothes to impress her. He gets jealous when a gust of wind blows up her skirt because he's jealous of the idea that some other man might have seen her shapely legs. And it's just like, oh no. And then the final big change between the book and the musical is the presentation of the robbery scene. So probably if you have seen the musical, you'll be familiar with the robbery, where Thénardier lures Valjean and Cosette over to get money from them, recognises Valjean and then quickly tries to steal from him. However, before he's able to do anything, Javert arrives and quickly breaks it up. Valjean takes Cosette and flees before Javert can recognise him. And that's a very, very quick scene in the musical. It takes maybe like 1 minute. Whereas that scene in the book is actually a lot more drawn out. So in the book, it's actually Eponine who lures Valjean and Cosette over to the Thénardiers' hovel at the Gorbeau tenement. And Valjean and Cosette originally go there with a small amount of money, Valjean promising that he'll come later in the day to give them more. However, during this exchange, Thénardier recognises Jean Valjean and Cosette. He doesn't let on that he knows who they are, he lets them leave, but immediately starts plotting with Madame Thénardier about what they're going to do to Valjean when he returns, deciding that he and his gang are going to attack and extort him for money. However, Marius lives right next door in the Gorbeau tenement, and what the Thénardiers do not know is that Marius has a little peephole and he has heard the entire conversation. Worried that the father of his love Cosette is going to be attacked, he goes to the police station. He lets Javert know what he has heard, and Javert gives him a gun and tells him that the police are going to be surrounding the area, but that Marius has to catch Thénardier actually trying to attack the man. He gives him the gun in order to shoot to give a signal to the police. It's also at this point that the fact that Waterloo has not been mentioned into the story that we don't get this aspect of Marius kind of battling himself, because whilst Marius is listening to the interaction between Thénardier and Valjean, he finds out that Thénardier was the man who saved his father at the Battle of Waterloo, and he's suddenly very conflicted. Javert arrives at the Gorbeau tenement and arrests Thénardier, and Valjean is quickly able to escape, but not before Thénardier is able to gloat to Javert that he missed his chance of catching Jean Valjean. And that's book 3! So yeah, quite a few changes between the book and the musical. Once again, I understand for time why they made these changes, but I feel like it's so enjoyable to read the book and to be able to get these little glimpses of the story that you weren't able to get from the musical. I feel like it just makes it a much richer story, and you're able to make connections between different characters through the book in a way that you want in the musical. Do let me know what your favourite song from this particular section of Les Mis is. I think for me it would definitely have to be Stars, which would fit right at the end of book 3. I'd love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic, fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye!